I stood in the doorway of my childhood home, my hand trembling on the brass doorknob that had turned beneath my fingers 1,000 times before. November wind cut through my coat as I watched warm light spill from the windows onto the frost-covered lawn. Inside, I could hear laughter and the clatter of dishes. My sister Margaret's voice rose above the others, bright and sharp as always. It had been 3 years since I'd come home for Thanksgiving. 3 years since the miscarriage. 3 years since everything changed. My husband David touched my shoulder gently. "We can leave, Helen. We don't have to do this," I shook my head. At 58 years old, I thought I'd learned how to face difficult things. I'd buried my father, survived a cancer scare, weathered the storms that come with nearly 4 decades of living. But nothing had prepared me for losing a child I'd never held, or for the words my mother had spoken afterward. The door swung open before I could knock. My nephew stood there, 17 and gangly, his face lighting up with genuine surprise. "Aunt Helen, you came!" Thomas pulled me into a hug before I could respond. Over his shoulder, I saw my mother appear in the hallway, wiping her hands on her apron. She was 79 now, her hair completely silver, her movements slower than I remembered. Our eyes met, and something flickered across her face, guilt perhaps, or fear, or maybe just the weight of 3 years of silence between a mother and daughter. "Helen," she said softly. "I didn't think you'd come. I almost didn't." The words hung in the air between us as David guided me inside with a gentle hand on my back. Margaret emerged from the kitchen, her 2 daughters trailing behind her. My sister had always been the golden child, the one who did everything right, married at 25, had 3 healthy children by 35, never questioned the path laid out before her. "Well," Margaret said, her voice tight, "this is unexpected." I removed my coat slowly, buying time, remembering why I'd stayed away so long. The last time I'd been in this house, I'd been 41 weeks pregnant, my body round with the miracle that had taken 15 years and countless treatments to achieve. I'd rubbed my belly as I helped Mom peel potatoes, talking about nursery colors and baby names. 2 days later, I delivered a silent son. They named him Michael, though he never drew breath. The dining room table was already set, the good china my grandmother had brought from Ireland gleaming under the chandelier. I counted the place settings automatically. 13, unlucky number, my father used to say, though he'd never been superstitious about much else. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes, Mom said, her voice carefully neutral. "Margaret, help me with the turkey." I watched them disappear into the kitchen, leaving me alone with David, Thomas, and Margaret's husband Robert, who offered me an apologetic smile. He was a kind man, always had been, caught in the middle of a family drama not of his making. Thomas sat down beside me. "I'm glad you're here, Aunt Helen. I missed you." My throat tightened. Thomas had been 14 the last time I'd seen him, still a boy. Now he was nearly a man, with his grandfather's strong jaw and his mother's determined eyes. "I missed you too, sweetheart. How's school?" As he talked about college applications and his plans to study engineering, I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. This was why I'd come, wasn't it? Not for my mother or my sister, but for Thomas and his younger sisters. For David, who'd patiently waited for me to be ready to face this house again. For the family connections that mattered despite everything. Margaret called us to dinner. We filed into the dining room, taking our assigned seats. I noticed Mom had placed me at the far end of the table, as far from her as possible while still being included. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. The turkey sat in the center of the table, golden and perfect, surrounded by all the traditional dishes: sweet potatoes with marshmallows, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce both jellied and whole berry, because Dad had liked it jellied, and Margaret preferred it whole. And even 3 years after his death, we still made both. Mom stood at the head of the table, carving knife in hand. She'd taken over this duty after Dad died, claiming it as her right as matriarch. She carved slowly, methodically, her hands still steady despite her age. "Before we eat," she said, not looking at anyone in particular, "I want to say something." My stomach clenched. "Please," I thought. "Please don't do this now." "I'm grateful," she continued, "that we're all here together, that our family remains strong and pure, that the Callahan line continues through Margaret's children." The knife paused over the turkey breast. Then she looked directly at me for the first time since I'd arrived, and she smiled. It was a small smile, almost sad, but there was something else in it too, something that made my blood run cold. Thanks to your miscarriage, our family line remains pure. The room went absolutely silent. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to stop. I felt David's hand find mine under the table, squeezing hard. Margaret laughed. It started as a small sound, almost like a cough, but then it grew, filling the room with its sharp edges. Mom, really? You're going to say it out loud? Finally? I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The words echoed in my head, rearranging themselves, trying to make sense. Pure. Family line. Pure. What? I whispered. What does that mean? Mom set down the carving knife carefully. Her hands were shaking now. Your father and I, we never told you. We thought it was kinder that way. But you had a right to know why we were relieved when you lost the baby. David stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the wooden floor. That's enough. Helen, we're leaving, but I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not without understanding. Tell me, I said, my voice stronger now. Tell me what you mean by pure. Margaret's laughter had stopped, but she was still smiling, that same cruel little smile she'd worn when we were children and she'd gotten her way. Don't you know, Helen? Haven't you figured it out yet? Dad wasn't your biological father. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. That's not true, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were a lie. Pieces were falling into place, memories rearranging themselves into a new and terrible pattern. The way Dad had sometimes looked at me with a sadness I didn't understand. The way Mom had always favored Margaret. The family photos where I looked nothing like anyone else. My dark eyes and olive skin so different from their Irish fairness. Mom sank into her chair. She suddenly looked every one of her 79 years. I had an affair, she said quietly. 29 years into my marriage, I had an affair with a man from work. You were the result, Helen. So when I got pregnant, I said slowly, each word feeling like broken glass in my mouth. You were relieved when I lost the baby because he would have carried someone else's blood. Someone outside the perfect Callahan family. It's not like that, Mom protested weakly. Then what is it like? I stood up now, my legs barely holding me. Explain to me how being grateful that your grandchild died makes any sense. Explain to me how my child's death was a blessing because of blood that runs in my veins through no choice of my own. Thomas pushed back from the table, his face flushed with anger. Grandma, how could you say something like that? That's horrible. You don't understand, Margaret cut in. You're too young to understand family legacy, family pride. I understand that you're all terrible people, Thomas shot back. Aunt Helen, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He left the room and I heard his feet pounding up the stairs to the bedroom that had been his whenever he stayed over. Margaret's daughters, 12 and 15, sat frozen in their chairs, their eyes wide with shock and confusion. Girls, go upstairs, Robert said quietly. When they didn't move, he said it again firmer. Now. They fled, leaving just the 6 of us. David's hand was still in mine, the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly become unrecognizable. Who was he? I asked. My biological father. Who was he? Mom looked down at her hands. His name was Samuel Torres. He worked in accounting at the hospital. He was married. It was a mistake, Helen. A terrible mistake. Is he alive? I don't know. We ended things after I found out I was pregnant. He never knew about you. I thought about my son, Michael. I thought about holding his tiny, perfect body, about the way his fingers had curled slightly as if reaching for something. I thought about the funeral, where only David had truly mourned with me, while my mother and sister had stood dry-eyed and distant. One real grandchild is enough, I said, remembering words I'd overheard 3 years ago, words I'd thought I'd misunderstood. That's what you said to Margaret at the funeral. You thought I couldn't hear you, but I did. I just didn't understand what you meant. Margaret had the grace to look uncomfortable. Mom was just upset. She didn't mean it the way it sounded. Yes, she did. The clarity was almost painful. She meant exactly what it sounded like. My child wasn't good enough because half his blood came from me and half my blood came from Samuel Torres, whoever he was. I turned to my mother. Did Dad know? She nodded slowly. He figured it out when you were 2. You look so different from Margaret. We had a terrible fight, but we decided to stay together. He loved you, Helen. Whatever else was true, Richard loved you as his own. But you didn't. The words fell like stones into still water. Mom's face crumpled. I did love you. I do love you. But it was complicated. Every time I looked at you, I saw my mistake. I saw the way I'd betrayed Richard. And when you got pregnant, after all those years of trying, part of me was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that your child would be another reminder. Afraid that when people looked at your family, they'd see that you were different, and they'd ask questions. This town is small, Helen. People remember things. Samuel had dark hair and dark eyes just like you. If your son had looked like you, if he'd looked like Samuel, people might have started putting pieces together. I felt something inside me break and reform, harder and sharper than before. So you prayed that I would lose my baby. No, Mom's voice was fierce now. I never prayed for that, never. But when it happened, when you lost him, there was a moment, just a moment, where I felt relief. And I've hated myself for it every day since. Not enough to apologize, I said. Not enough to even try to make things right. David tugged gently on my hand. Helen, please, let's go. But I wasn't finished. I turned to Margaret. And you? What's your excuse? Why did you laugh? My sister's face was flushed, whether from embarrassment or anger I couldn't tell. Because it's absurd, Helen. All of it. You've always been so dramatic, so sensitive. Mom made one comment 3 years ago, and you've held on to it like it was the end of the world. She was glad my son died. She was processing grief. In her own way. We all were. But you turned it into this huge thing, cut us all off, refused to come to family gatherings. You made everything about you, just like you always do. I stared at my sister, this woman who shared a mother with me, but suddenly seemed like a complete stranger. Did you know? About Dad not being my father? She hesitated, then nodded. Mom told me when I was 25, right before my wedding. She wanted me to understand the importance of staying faithful, of keeping the family pure. The word pure kept coming back, like a poison that had infected everything. I thought about my childhood, about all the times I'd felt like I didn't quite belong, about the way Margaret had always been the favorite, and I'd told myself it was just normal sibling rivalry. Robert cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I think this is all completely wrong. Helen, Margaret, maybe this isn't the time. When would be the time? I interrupted. When would be the right time to tell me that my family considers me contaminated, that they celebrated my child's death? I didn't celebrate it, Mom said, tears running down her face now. I was conflicted. Can't you understand that? Can't you understand how complicated it was? No, I said simply. I can't. Because when I lost Michael, when I held my dead son in my arms, the only thing I felt was grief. Pure, uncomplicated grief. There was no part of me that felt relieved or grateful or anything but absolutely shattered. I picked up my purse from where I'd set it by the door. David followed, putting his arm around my shoulders. Wait, Mom called out. Please, Helen, don't leave like this. We can talk about it, work through it. I paused at the door. You had 3 years to talk about it. 3 years to call me, to apologize, to try to explain. Instead, you carved the turkey and smiled about how pure your family line is now. That tells me everything I need to know. Where will you go? Margaret asked. It's Thanksgiving. You'll be alone. I'll be with the family. That matters, I said, looking at David. The one I chose. As we walked to the car, I heard Thomas's window open above us. Aunt Helen, he called down. Can I come with you? I looked up at my nephew, his face pressed against the screen. What about your parents? I'll deal with them later, please. I don't want to be here right now. David and I exchanged glances. He nodded. Come on down, I called up. Bring a jacket. 5 minutes later, Thomas climbed into the back seat of our car, a small duffel bag in his hand. I told Mom I needed some air. I'll go back tomorrow, deal with the fallout then. We drove in silence for a while, the lights of town growing brighter as we left the quiet residential streets behind. David reached over and took my hand. Where to? He asked quietly. I hadn't thought that far ahead. Then I remembered. The Riverside Diner. They always do Thanksgiving dinner for people who have nowhere else to go. The diner was crowded when we arrived, filled with a mix of elderly people, young couples far from their own families, and a few people who looked like they'd come in from the homeless shelter down the street. We found a booth in the corner and ordered 3 turkey dinners from a waitress who looked tired but smiled anyway. I'm sorry about all that, Thomas said once we'd settled in. I had no idea. Mom never told me any of it. It's not your fault, I assured him. None of this is your fault. Still, The way Grandma talked about your baby, about you, that was messed up. Really messed up. Our food arrived, plain diner food that couldn't compare to the elaborate spread we'd left behind. But when I took my first bite, it tasted better than anything I could remember. Can I ask you something? Thomas said hesitantly. I nodded. Are you going to try to find him, your biological father? The question hung in the air. I'd been asking myself the same thing ever since Mom had spoken his name. Samuel Torres. My father, but not my dad. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to. Part of me is afraid of what I'll find. What if he's dead? What if he's alive but wants nothing to do with me? What if I have half-siblings who don't know I exist? What if you have half-siblings who'd be thrilled to meet you? Thomas countered. What if he's a good person who would have wanted to know about you if he'd had the chance? David squeezed my hand. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. We'll figure it out together. I looked around the diner, at all these people who'd found themselves here on Thanksgiving for whatever reason. Some were laughing, some eating in silence, some looked sad, some looked content. Life was messy and complicated, I realized. Families were messy and complicated. There was no such thing as a pure bloodline, no perfect family tree unmarred by secrets and mistakes. Do you regret coming tonight? David asked. I thought about it. Part of me wished I'd never heard those words, never learned the truth about my parentage. But another part of me felt oddly free, as if a weight I'd been carrying for 3 years had finally lifted. No, I said slowly. I needed to hear it. I needed to know that it wasn't in my head, that the distance I'd felt from them my whole life was real. And I needed to know that cutting them out of my life wasn't an overreaction to one comment. It was self-preservation. Thomas picked at his mashed potatoes. Do you think you'll ever talk to them again? Grandma and Mom? Maybe, I said. Someday, but not for a long time. And only if they can understand why what they said was so deeply wrong. We ate in comfortable silence for a while. The diner's jukebox played old country songs, and through the window I could see cars passing by, families heading home from their own Thanksgiving celebrations. Thank you, Thomas said suddenly, for letting me come with you, for not making me feel like I had to choose sides. You don't have to choose sides, I told him. You can love your mother and grandmother, and still acknowledge that what they did was wrong. You can maintain relationships with them while also having your own values and boundaries. Is that what you're doing? No, I admitted. I'm too hurt right now. Maybe that's weak of me, but I can't pretend to be okay with what happened. I can't sit at a table with people who were relieved when my son died, even if one of them is my mother. David signaled for the check. We should probably get you home soon, he said to Thomas. Before your parents call the police. Thomas laughed, though there wasn't much humor in it. Yeah, probably. As we drove back toward my mother's house, I felt my stomach tighten again, but Thomas surprised me. Actually, can you drop me at Dad's workshop? He keeps a key hidden there. I'll crash on the couch tonight. Go home in the morning when everyone's calmed down. Robert ran a small furniture restoration business with a workshop on the edge of town. It seemed like a reasonable compromise. After we dropped Thomas off, David and I drove home in silence. Our house was dark and empty when we arrived, but it felt peaceful rather than lonely. Are you okay? David asked as we got ready for bed. I thought about the question. Was I okay? I just learned that my father wasn't my biological father. That my mother had been relieved when I lost my child, that my sister had known the truth for years and never told me. By any reasonable measure, I should be falling apart. I think I am, I said, surprising myself. I think I needed the truth, even if it hurt. And I think I needed to know that leaving was the right choice. That night, I dreamed about Michael for the first time in months. In the dream, he wasn't a silent infant but a little boy, maybe 3 or 4, with dark curly hair and David's smile. We were at a park, and he was running ahead of me, laughing, calling back for me to catch him. I knew it was just a dream, knew that Michael would never be that little boy, but it felt like a gift anyway, like a glimpse of what might have been. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the bedroom windows. It was Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, and I felt different somehow, lighter. My phone showed 3 missed calls from my mother and 2 from Margaret. There was also a text from Thomas, made it home. Mom's mad, but Dad's on my side. Thank you for yesterday. I deleted the voicemails from Mom and Margaret without listening to them. Maybe someday I'd be ready to hear what they had to say, but not today. Instead, I opened my laptop and typed Samuel Torres into a search engine. It was a common name, and hundreds of results came up. I added hospital accounting and the name of our town, narrowing the search, and there he was. An old article from a local business journal, 15 years old, celebrating his promotion to chief financial officer at the hospital where my mother had worked. The photo showed a man in his 40s with kind eyes, and yes, dark hair and olive skin like mine. I clicked through to the hospital's current staff directory. Samuel Torres was no longer listed. I tried searching for him on social media and found several profiles, but none that seemed to match the man in the photo. Then, on a genealogy website I'd used years ago when trying to understand my family medical history for fertility treatments, I entered his name. And there it was. Samuel Torres, born 1947, died 2018. Survived by his wife Maria, daughters Elena and Sophia, and 5 grandchildren. My sisters. I had sisters. The thought was overwhelming. I closed the laptop and sat there for a long moment, processing. Samuel Torres had lived his whole life not knowing I existed. He died not knowing that his brief affair had resulted in a child. And I had 2 half-sisters somewhere who had no idea they had another sibling. David found me sitting there an hour later, still staring at the closed laptop. "You found him," he said. "It wasn't a question. He's dead. Died 6 years ago. But he has 2 daughters. Had 2 daughters. They're my sisters, I guess. Half-sisters. Are you going to reach out to them?" I don't know. It feels selfish somehow, disrupting their lives with this information. Maybe it's better if they never know. David sat down beside me. Or maybe they have a right to know. Maybe they'd want to meet you. You won't know unless you try. He was right, of course. But the thought of reaching out terrified me. What would I say? "Hello, your father had an affair with my mother almost 60 years ago, and I'm the result?" How do you explain something like that without destroying someone's memory of their parent? Over the next few days, I thought about it constantly. I looked up Elena and Sophia Torres online, learning what I could from their public social media profiles. Elena was 55, a high school teacher in Seattle with 3 teenage kids. Sophia was 52, a veterinarian in Portland with twin daughters in college. They looked happy in their photos, smiling at family gatherings, posting about their kids' accomplishments. They had lives that didn't include me, didn't need the complication I would bring. But Thomas's words kept coming back to me. What if they'd be thrilled to meet you? On the Monday after Thanksgiving, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not an email or a message on social media, but an actual letter on paper. It took me 3 drafts to get it right. Dear Elena and Sophia, my name is Helen Morrison. I'm writing to you about a matter that's both personal and difficult to explain. I recently learned that your father, Samuel Torres, was also my biological father. I was born in 1967 as a result of a brief relationship between your father and my mother, though he never knew about my existence. I want to be clear that I'm not looking for money or trying to cause problems in your family. I simply wanted you to know that I exist, and that I would very much like to meet you if you're open to that. I understand this news might be shocking and possibly unwelcome. If you prefer not to respond, I'll respect that decision. But if you'd like to talk, I've included my contact information below. Whatever you decide, I want you to know that I'm glad to have found you, even from a distance. From what I can see, your father raised 2 remarkable women, and I'm grateful to know that much about the man I never had the chance to meet. With hope and respect, Helen Morrison. I printed 2 copies, addressed 2 envelopes, and mailed them before I could change my mind. Then I waited. A week passed, then 2. Christmas approached, and with it came another voicemail from my mother. This one I did listen to. "Helen, please, it's been a month. I know I hurt you, but you're my daughter. Can't we find a way past this? Call me. Please call me." I deleted it. Margaret sent a Christmas card, the kind with a perfect family photo on the front. Her, Robert, the 3 kids, all smiling in matching outfits. Inside, she'd written, "I know you're angry, but we're still family. That has to mean something." I put the card in a drawer and didn't respond. Thomas called on Christmas Eve. "Just wanted to check in," he said. "How are you doing?" "I'm okay." "Really, how are things at home?" "Tense. Mom's hurt that you won't talk to her. Grandma keeps crying, but honestly, I think they just miss having you there to criticize." I laughed to spite myself. "That's terrible." but true, he said cheerfully. Anyway, I wanted to let you know I got into MIT. Early admission. Thomas, that's wonderful. Congratulations. Thanks. I couldn't have done it without your help on my essays last summer, before everything went sideways. We talked for another half hour about his plans for college, his excitement about studying engineering, his nervousness about leaving home. It felt good, this connection that existed independent of the complicated family dynamics. After we hung up, David and I exchanged our own modest presents. A tradition we'd started after deciding not to have a big Christmas celebration. He'd gotten me a beautiful journal, the leather soft and inviting. For when you're ready to write, he said. Whatever you need to write. Letters, memories, feelings, whatever helps. I held the journal, running my fingers over the cover. That night, I wrote my first entry. Today, I'm grateful for David, for Thomas, for the chance to start over. I'm grateful that I'm learning I'm stronger than I thought. I'm grateful that I no longer have to pretend to be part of a family that never really wanted me. And I'm grateful that somewhere out there, I might have sisters who will see me for who I am, not for what my existence represents. 3 days after Christmas, an envelope arrived in the mail. The return address was Seattle. My hands shook as I opened it. Dear Helen, this is Elena. I received your letter, and I have to admit, my first reaction was shock. My second was to call Sophia immediately. We've spent the last week trying to process this information and decide how to respond. We did some research. We found records of our father working at the hospital you mentioned during the time you said you were born. We also did a DNA test through one of those ancestry websites and uploaded our results. If you're willing to do the same, we can confirm what you've told us. But here's the truth, even before confirmation, we believe you. Your letter felt honest and sincere. And your photo, which we found on your Facebook page, looks so much like our father that there's really no question. Sophia and I would like to meet you. We've talked about this at length, and we've agreed that our father would have wanted to know you. He was a good man, Helen. He wasn't perfect, but he was good. And if he'd known about you, he would have been part of your life. We're certain of that. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I could drive down next month, or if you prefer, we could meet halfway. Sophia's already planning to come up from Portland. She says she'll clear her schedule as soon as we have a date. We're nervous about this too. But we're also excited. We've always wanted a sister, and if the DNA confirms what we already know in our hearts, that's what you are. Please write back soon. With anticipation. Elena Torres Martinez. I read the letter 3 times, then called David at work. They want to meet me, I said when he answered. They believe me, and they want to meet me. That night, I sent off a DNA sample to the same ancestry website Elena had mentioned. 3 weeks later, the results came back. 25% DNA match with Elena Torres Martinez and Sofia Torres Chen. Half-siblings. I stared at the screen, at this scientific confirmation of what I'd known in my heart. I had sisters, real sisters. Not like Margaret, who shared a mother with me but seemed to share nothing else that mattered. These were women who carried the same genes from a man I'd never known, who were willing to welcome me into their lives despite the complicated circumstances of my existence. We arranged to meet at a restaurant halfway between Seattle and my town, a little place off the highway that Elena said had good reviews. The date was set for February 14th, Valentine's Day, which felt oddly appropriate, a celebration of different kinds of love. The morning of the meeting, I changed outfits 3 times. David finally took my hands and made me look at him. Helen, they already love you. They told you that in their emails. Just be yourself. I walked into that restaurant with my heart pounding, scanning the room for faces I'd only seen in photos. And there they were, sitting at a corner booth, both of them standing up as soon as they saw me. Elena was tall and professional looking, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Sophia was shorter, softer, with laugh lines around her eyes. But they both had the same features I saw every morning in the mirror. The same dark eyes, the same olive skin. Helen, Elena said. And then she was hugging me, and Sophia was hugging both of us, and we were all crying in the middle of a family restaurant on Valentine's Day. We sat down and for a moment, nobody knew what to say. Then Sophia laughed. This is so weird, you're our sister. We have a sister we didn't know about 2 months ago, and now you're here, and you're real. I know, I said. I keep having to remind myself this isn't a dream. Elena ordered coffee for all of us, and then we began to talk. They asked about my life, about growing up with our mother, but without our father. I told them about Richard, the man who'd raised me even though I wasn't his biological child, about his kindness and patience. "He sounds like a good man," Elena said. "I'm glad you had someone like that." Then they told me about Samuel, our father. He'd been quiet and gentle, they said. A man who loved numbers, but also loved people. He'd coached their soccer teams, helped with homework, never missed a school play or concert. "He made mistakes," Sophia said carefully. "Our parents went through a rough patch when I was little. They almost divorced. I didn't know the details until I was older, but apparently Dad had been unfaithful. Just once," Mom said. "He felt terrible about it, went to counseling, did everything he could to make it right. They stayed together, worked through it. It was you," Elena said, not unkindly. "You were the result of that one mistake. But Helen, you weren't a mistake. You were an innocent person who deserved to be loved and known." I told them about Michael then, about my son who'd never drawn breath. I told them about my mother's words, about the revelation of Thanksgiving dinner, about the years of feeling like I didn't quite belong. Sophia reached across the table and took my hand. "You belong here. With us. We're your family too." We talked for 4 hours, until the restaurant staff started giving us pointed looks and we realized we'd long overstayed our welcome. In the parking lot, we made plans to meet again, this time at Elena's house in Seattle where we could take our time, meet each other's families properly. "Our kids are going to be thrilled," Elena said. "They've always wanted more aunts and uncles and cousins." "Mine too," Sophia agreed. "And Helen, if you and David ever want to have children again, through adoption or whatever, you should know you'll have our full support. You'd make a wonderful mother." Driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Pure, uncomplicated hope for the future. I never did reach back out to my mother or Margaret. Thomas kept me updated on family news, and I was grateful for that connection, but I felt no need to repair what they had broken. Sometimes people ask me if I regret cutting them off. The answer is no. What I learned that Thanksgiving was that family isn't just about blood or shared history. It's about love and respect, and seeing each other as whole people worthy of dignity. My mother and sister couldn't do that. They saw me as a reminder of shame, a contamination of their perfect family line. But Elena and Sophia saw me as a sister, as someone worth knowing and loving despite the complicated circumstances of my birth. That was the real gift of that terrible Thanksgiving dinner. Not the revelation of my parentage, painful as that was, but the freedom it gave me to build my own family from people who chose to love me. These days I spend holidays with David, with Elena and Sophia and their families, sometimes with Thomas when he can get away from school. We've started our own traditions, ones based on acceptance and joy rather than obligation and judgment. I still think about Michael, my son who never was, but I think about him differently now. I think about how he would have been loved by his aunts and cousins, by this family I've found. I think about how his loss, while still painful, was just loss, not a blessing or a relief or anything but sad. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about my mother carving that turkey, smiling as she thanked me for my miscarriage. And I feel grateful, not for the cruelty of her words, but for the clarity they gave me. She showed me exactly who she was, and I finally believed her. That's its own kind of freedom. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your comments mean the world to me, and I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family, forgiveness, and finding where you truly belong. Thank you for listening.